Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between podcast. I'm a clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, consciousness, and what it all means. I'm extremely excited to welcome Shane Smith to the show today. Shane has possessed the gift of intuition and seeing spirits since his earliest memories as a young child, and he has developed this gift throughout his life. On July 7th, 1997, Shane was struck by lightning while rock climbing west of Fort Collins, Colorado. After the lightning strike, Shane began 5 years of recovery. In that time, Shane took on an even keener sense of his abilities. He has been featured on the national television series Monsters and Mysteries in 2015, as well as multiple paranormal podcasts and several radio interviews. Shane specializes in helping families with personal closure with the deceased. He has been instrumental in providing details to authorities in several local Colorado investigations and national intelligence authorities in investigations across the world. Welcome, Shane. A few things to talk about before we get started with today's episode. If you have not subscribed to my newsletter yet, I have some exciting things coming out in the next weeks, months. Unclear how long it's going to take me to get it together, but there will be some stuff coming out and I don't want you to miss it. So head on over to dramyrobbins.com and subscribe to my newsletter. And now to today's show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Amy.
So can you tell us sort of how your abilities were when you were a child and what you experienced, and then how those sort of grew and skyrocketed once you were struck by lightning?
Well, my first memory was actually in the womb. I remember my soul coming into my body, and I remember my parents were arguing. But I didn't feel like they were my parents. I felt like I was just about to come into this world for a purpose. I was excited and happy. That was my first memory. And then as a child, I had imaginary friends who were little see-through children. And then I remember spirits dropping by every now and then and talking to me. I don't quite remember what they said. And then I just saw them throughout my life. And I had a lot of dreams, precognitive dreams that would come true. When I was a teenager, a friend of mine told me that he was going up in an airplane with another friend, and I saw it crash. So I said, you can't go up in this airplane, it's going to crash. So he listened to me, and the airplane did crash. So I experienced a lot of those growing up. I also had a dream that the space shuttle was going to blow up, and then that happened. It was just really frustrating not being able to know what to do or how to help in those situations.
And you must have been young when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened when you were struck by lightning?
Well, I was at the top of Horsetooth Rock, just west of Fort Collins, and I heard a humming noise, and my friend had long blonde hair, and it stood straight up. And I felt the electricity in the air, and all of a sudden, the lightning hit the rock I was standing on and went through my body, and it was all very slight. It rotated my pelvis a little. I could hear my bones cracking. It pushed some of my skull out, some of it in, pushed my jaw off the hinge a little bit. And then I had metal frame sunglasses on the top of my head, and they turned red and started to melt. It didn't knock me out, but I felt really weird. I felt like when you have the flu and you're on a lot of medication, felt that way for about 2 weeks. And then I was back in New York, and I was walking down the street, and I suddenly forgot where I was going and forgot where I lived. I had to sit down and really figure out where I lived and where I was going. Luckily, I had a friend with me. And then depression set in, and I was just just a mess. And my spinal fluid started to gel because my vertebrae was in my spinal reservoir. So it was a kind of a slow death, but I was lucky and got help from a specialist here in Colorado who's a chiropractor, and he did other things, laser work and things like that, and he was able to heal me. So it took a long time to recover. I walked with 2 canes. I couldn't read. It was difficult for a while.
That sounds horrible. And then what was the shift in your abilities? How did you notice that something was now different in terms of your psychic connection or?
Well, it just happened more often, and I would get visions that were more clear. Before, I would see someone, well, for example, my mother, when I was growing up, used to give me milk cartons with those pictures on them of the missing kids. Mm-hmm. And she would just say, now tell me where this child is. And I could describe the surrounding area, but I didn't know who did it, where it was, or anything other than that. And as I got older, and after the lightning happened, I could see everything, what happened to the person, how they felt. I started to feel the actual things that happened to them when they were murdered, for example. They were hit in the head, if they were raped or anything. It was really tough.
Yeah, that must have been intense.
Yes, it was. And then I could see the face of the person who did it and all the details. And now it's progressed to where I can actually see them dying and moving to the other side and being greeted by whoever they are there to be greeted by and how they feel. And so it's just progressed in every aspect. The other thing that I find fascinating is I can walk into an old building and actually know what was there, feel the people, hear the people from 100 years ago, which I wasn't able to do anything like that before.
So can we talk, so you work with missing persons and
Yes.
work to solve cases. So
Yes.
how does that typically work? And why aren't you used all the time?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm used mostly with the families. The police, I haven't met any police that are real cooperative because I like to touch the space or some evidence so I can get pictures of what happened. And they just won't let me touch the evidence. And sometimes in my experience, the police either messed up the crime scene or were actually involved in some way or knew somebody that was involved in some way. I would love to be able to work with the police, but a lot of them just don't want to work with us.
So when you're doing these readings, do you step into kind of what happened to the person? Like, how does that, can you walk us through what that looks like for you?
Yes. If it's someone from out of this area, they send me a photograph, and I take the photograph, and the spirit of the person who has passed comes through, or their guides or my guides, and I'm able to speak with them, and they tell me what happened. They show me images of what happened. Sometimes they say a few words, and then I can just see everything that happened from what was going on in their life through them crossing over, through images and through messages I get from the other side.
Mm-hmm. So with the psychology, or not the psychology, the spiritual energy of spaces, what is that typically like? I mean, I know a lot of people often walk into a space and say, oh, the energy here is this, or the energy here, I don't like the energy. This place has a good energy, a bad energy. Can you talk a little about what that means from your perspective?
Sometimes it's residual. Occasionally it's truly haunted. But when people are in a room, they typically leave their energy, their personality, and everything. And I go in and I just sort of soak it up like a sponge. I can tell you the personality of the person that was there. For example, I used to fix and flip homes, and I would go in and I would scratch the paint off the wall, and all of a sudden I would get a whole scene of a family that lived there several years ago when that particular paint was on the wall, because it holds their energy.
So anything in a home holds the energy.
Yes. Objects, anything a person has touched or worn, it all holds the energy, yes.
And it holds all parts of the energy, just the negative part? Like, how do we know, like, if a space has negative energy or feels bad, what is that usually attributed to?
Attributed to pain, anger, sorrow, depending on the person's personality and what they pushed out the most into the atmosphere in the room, into the energy. So in my experience, if I go into a room and I feel depressed, I know that someone there was depressed. If I walk into a room and it feels happy, I know that person was happy, and I can pick up who the person was, why they were happy in more detail.
Gotcha. And so I have a couple questions. One, what makes something haunted? Like when you walk into a space, is it that the energy is stuck? Is it that the person is stuck? Is it negative energy that makes it bad? Is it a ghost? Like, what makes a space haunted?
Well, and the way I feel about a haunting is when a person is stuck here and they don't cross over, and they sometimes they don't realize that they're dead, or sometimes they just don't want to cross over for different reasons. They're attached to something, they're attached to the property or an object, and they don't want to leave. So sometimes I can get them to move on or just simply leave through intention. So
you set the intention for them?
Yes.
To move forward, to leave the space?
Yes.
Do they ever not leave?
I have not had any experiences where they have not left. They always have left for me.
Can a space be cleared out energetically?
Absolutely. Yes, it can.
Just through like smudging and saging, or
smudging, saging. I'll go into a home. If someone has just moved into a home, sometimes a realtor friend will call me and say, these people would like you to come over and just clear all the bad energy out. So I'll go in. For example, I went into a home a while back and I could feel that this woman and her son lived in this home, and the son was not very nice to the woman. And all that energy sort of stuck there. So I smudged it. I opened the windows. I take some sea salt and water and sort of wash the walls and say a prayer and fill it with light and love. And when the person comes back, they definitely see a big difference.
What can happen if you move into a space that's not energetically cleared? Which reminds me, I probably need to smudge my house now that the seasons are changing.
Well, it just feels heavy. The air feels heavy. And a lot of times you go into a space and people will be angry at each other for no particular reason, because that's the energy that the person before left behind. And the people that walk into that space don't realize what's going on, why they're angry at each other so much. So when you can go in and clear it, the whole thing just changes. It shifts completely.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're really talking about just, it's like house cleaning.
Yes.
But just energetically cleaning it out. So
exactly.
There's a freshness to it.
Yes. And I always light a vanilla candle. For some reason, that helps as well.
So we've spoken a couple times, but when we spoke last time, you were really talking about, you were sharing with me some of the examples that you have of like going into places. Can you share some of those with my listeners, like old places that you've experienced?
Oh, sure. You mean just an old establishment or an old home?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I walked into a building and I could see what it looked like 100 years ago. I could tell that they were making dresses and clothing, and they were selling different kinds of items for kitchens way back then. And I could feel the happiness and the hard work, and I can even smell the odor that came off the people at the time. They didn't bathe a whole lot back then. And then when I leave the space and they check it out, they find out that what I said was correct. It really was a dress shop. They really did make dresses there. I've also gone into space. I went into a space a while back, and I could see an older woman. She had a heart attack right there in the kitchen and died. And it happened to be the woman's mother. The woman lived next door. And when I was talking to her, I was doing just a personal reading for her. And she said, my mother died upstairs in that building next door. And I said, yes, she died of a heart attack, correct? She says, yes. So I see different things, and when I go into different buildings.
What would you say is sort of the biggest message that is imparted to us, or that you hear?
Forgive one another. Forgive and love.
Seems simple enough, right?
Yes.
So, Shane, if people want to find you, where can they do that?
Go to shanesmithpsychicmedium.com and click on information.
Okay. Well, and I will have all of your information in the show notes of this podcast. Shane, thank you so much for your time today. People, stay tuned for next week to hear the reading that Shane is going to give to one of the listeners. So thank you so much, Shane. Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.